Daikaiju Network, where we have a healthy obsession with King Kong. I am your co-host, Kent, and with me is your other co-host,
Jason. How's it going, everyone?
As you may have noticed from my greeting for this particular show, I said King Kong. Hence, we are going to be discussing King Kong, not just the original film, but the character. We're going to be discussing a little bit how he was conceived. And then more importantly, we're just going to kind of have a general discussion about movies and legacy and things of that sort. And with it being 90 years of King Kong, this is Kong month. So this episode, it's a general discussion of Kong. 2 weeks from now, we will have a commentary where we will be doing Son of Kong. So you have that to look forward to in a couple of weeks for us.
Definitely. So as far as the housekeeping, I'm guessing a lot of you know, but if you're if you're here for the first time, if you see
where the hell have you been?
The subscribe button down below, wherever you're watching us, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well as smash the like button as well. And for everything Daikaiju Network, you can find us in one place at our Linktree URL right there on the screen, /Daikaiju Network. As far as video platforms, besides obviously being on YouTube, we're also on Twitch, Rumble, Facebook Live, and as well as Odyssey. And we're also on audio platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, as well as TuneIn. And you can find both audio and video versions of all of our episodes at our own website at daikaijunetwork.com.
All right, so let's just get right to the meat and potatoes of it all. King Kong, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to... we're not going to finish this. But yes, 90 years. I mean, one could argue the original Daikaiju, unless you're going to count the dinosaurs from The Lost World from a few years earlier and that stop-motion animation feature, which I could go either way. But if you're talking about original Kaiju... Sure. One could even argue the moon with the face on it from, I think, what was it, First Men on the Moon?
Or
where the rocket ship blasted that moon in the eye. It depends on what your definition of kaiju is. But I would say it's either the dinosaurs from Lost World or King Kong.
Or that giant creepy pig from like one of the very first movies too, back in the 1900s. There, I'll have to show you. It's kind of creepy looking, but
but nevertheless, regardless, Kong is one of the OGs, and for some of you, he may be the OG. And so, to kind of to give a little bit of an overview as far as how Kong himself was conceived, as far as not just a character, but even the original 1933 film. Kong basically is the creation of Marion C. Cooper and Ernest Schoedsack. Both men fought during World... What? What was funny? Well, you looked like you were laughing about something. But both men fought during World War I, and the two men in terms of physical stature couldn't be more different. Marion C. Cooper was a minuscule guy. He was like 5'4" or something like that, not very tall. Ernest Schoedsack was about 6'4", 6'5". So you have this interesting dichotomy between the two of them in physical stature. Nevertheless, Marion C. Cooper is kind of credited more than Ernest Schoedsack as far as being more of the creator behind Kong, mainly because Cooper himself was, by and large, a pretty fearless individual. There were a couple times during the First World War where he got shot down. He was a pilot. And even at one point, he got shot down. His plane landed over the border in the newly formed Soviet Union. And it has been described that after his plane landed in the newly formed Soviet Union, that he somehow not just physically figured his way out of the country and kind of back into Europe proper, but was able to just talk to other new Soviets and kind of avoid getting himself captured and to get out of the newly formed Soviet Union. But also, Cooper himself was very much an adventurer. He kind of fit into what you would consider the stereotypical adventurer, Indiana Jones cowboy type of individual. He went on a number of expeditions by himself. He was someone who enjoyed doing some things that could endanger his own life. But after... Yes.
Well, and the other thing to add, that Cooper himself became fascinated by gorillas at the age of 6 too. So at a very young age, and right around the turn of the century, he was given a book as far as explorations and adventures in Africa. So that's sort of where he kind of gets his sort of calling card in a way, and kind of what you mentioned earlier as far as him being kind of like this Indiana Jones-esque type of character. I've seen some images, even the one I'm seeing here with him looking up at the this giant animatronic Kong, where he kind of has this fedora cap that makes him look like Indiana Jones in a way.
And eventually, he made his way to California, and Ernest Schoedsack, who was originally from Iowa, also made his way to California. Both men were big into motion pictures, which, again, were still relatively new at the time. By the way. Yeah. And so what ended up happening is that through several different trips Cooper himself took at various locations across the globe of shooting actual wildlife and putting himself and his crew at times in danger of certain animals that, could have killed one or several of them. They, like you said, he was interested in gorillas. They decided, hey, why not have sort of this gorilla type film and do kind of a Beauty and the Beast type of thing. And that idea of the Kong story came along after a while. It wasn't one of the earlier ideas that he had. It's sort of, in my research, seemed a bit hazy as far as exactly how they came to the point of, hey, like, instead of like maybe shooting a real gorilla and trying to figure out some ways of compositing a real gorilla with other shots, they ended up doing stop motion. And I'll get to that here in a moment, because that's obviously another big part of the whole Kong story. But they decided to do this gorilla story. And they realized through like The Lost World and a couple other films that came out beforehand that eventually stop motion was the way to go, and they found Willis O'Brien. Willis O'Brien himself was very much intrigued by gorillas. I believe they even found a handful of sketches that he had that involved gorillas and the like. And so it was sort of this blending between the three men that really helped to bring Kong to life, so to speak. And I know I'm skipping over a lot of minutia and stuff, but there's a lot of material out there you could either read or even watch. In fact, I know this DVD of King Kong that I have from 2005, and probably, I'm sure even now, recent Blu-ray releases have it. It's a 7-part documentary series on the creation of Kong and how the film came to be. But we're just going to kind of gloss over and kind of hit the basic points here. But what ended up happening is that several different variations of the script and story were made, and some people, one person I think even died. One of the scriptwriters I think even died at one point during the process, and several other people came in, and ultimately Ernest Schoedsack's wife, I think, was kind of the final individual to write and prep the final script of King Kong. And again, they ultimately went with Willis O'Brien to do stop motion. the stop motion itself, the process of putting scenes together is absolutely incredible. Not only just the individual movements of the different creatures during various shots, but at times there were composite shots where you have the live motion actors mixed in with the animatronic, not the animatronic, but the armature puppets. You have occasional issues with some of the puppets, not working right, either melting or just getting stiff because of the hot lights that were being used. There were times too where 3 different sets, so to speak, were made. So you have a background matte painting plus the foreground where you would have your armatures, and then sometimes you would have a glass pane where painted foliage and other minutia were put on to give this depth of a very luscious, deep jungle. That was very effective. Something that was so basic in terms of how it was put together, yet time-consuming, obviously, but something so simple to make it seem like you were in this vast jungle. There were even several different Kong armatures made. One with kind of the short face, as they called it, and then another one with a longer face. As I'm sure if you've seen the movie enough times, I noticed it myself many years back when I was watching this film after a few times. You kind of notice like his face is a little bit different in some of the shots. Then they built this big mechanical King Kong, the upper half, and then a big Kong hand and foot even used in a few scenes. So, the movie, obviously, it was a huge hit in the early years of the Depression, despite the fact that so many people were broke and poor and homeless. People flocked to go see this movie. You could argue it was one of the first major blockbuster pictures. The film was very expensive to make. I think they said it was $800,000, if I'm not mistaken, that it cost to make. Let me check here.
It was actually just a little over 670,000.
670,000. So here, I'll do research. Let's see what that is in today's dollars.
And then also after that, do what 5.3 million is for today's money, because that is the box office.
And that was very, very good for the time. I mean, obviously the movie did mucho dinero. I mean, it was very, very, let me see here, I'm trying to get the calculation, 1933, you said 670,000. See, that's 67. Okay, I think I got it right. Okay, well, it can only do up to 2022. So the budget approximately, let me put, comma there. And comma there. Oh, well, just a hair over, I guess, $15 million in terms of budget. But that was very expensive, not just for the time, but even more expensive considering you're in the early stages of a depression.
And then check 5.3 million as far as the box office. See what that translates into today. Because that'd be a bit interesting to know.
Did I do this? Okay, I think 100,000 million. Okay, I think I did that right. All right, so 100 be approximately 119 million.
That ain't too bad, yeah.
119 million versus a budget that's the equivalent of a hair over 15 million in today's money. That is considered a big moneymaker. Very profitable. And obviously it would go on to spawn Son of Kong, which was like Godzilla Raids again. Very much rushed into production. Brought out within about 6 months later. And the ending results in a lot of people's minds is very lackluster. Although I would argue, I think Godzilla Raids Again is a slightly superior sequel than something like Son of Kong. But nevertheless, there you have it. In very much a nutshell, kind of the creation and the result of King Kong. Again, I would recommend anybody, if you got the 2005 DVD or one of the new Blu-rays, again, like I said, I would be very surprised if none of the new Blu-ray releases of the 33 film didn't have that documentary. But watch that documentary and or go seek out some literature on the creation of the 33 film, because it is absolutely incredible. Just there's so much other details involved, and the interesting evolution of the story and this character, and just it's incredible. It really is, I think, just as unique, actually maybe even more interesting than the creation of the original Godzilla.
And then they just recently been doing an exhibit of King Kong here just for the 90th anniversary, and I think it was just they were doing one nearby you. If I'm correct.
Yeah, it was in Ypsilanti, Michigan, which is like a 45-minute drive from here. I didn't know it until the final couple days, and then those final days we had an ice storm here, so I couldn't go. So I didn't even know it, and it was up here for a month. I'm pissed that I missed that. If I would have known that was there, I would have gone to go see that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to take a look, see if there's there has to be some kind of website as far as the exhibit, and then check to see. You know what? It's time for some another edition of research here.
We gotta have a theme song that we play as we're doing it.
So King Kong, exhibit.
But this character is the creation of the original film is something very unique. One of the interesting things you will find too on that 7-part documentary is that Peter Jackson and his crew, when they were in the very early stages of doing their King Kong film, they wanted to recreate a little bit of what O'Brien did with Kong. Actually, using stop motion, they created their own Kong armature from replicas of original plans that were drawn up by O'Brien to create the armature. And some of the results are very stunning. Like the stop motion is so smooth, you would even wonder if it was computer generated. And it's very interesting and unique what they did. And Peter Jackson, regardless of what you think about some of his movies, he's a very meticulous filmmaker that really tries to understand the source material that he's going after, especially if he's doing something like the Lord of the Rings, Hobbit, and King Kong stories from material that was made beforehand already. And one of the things, in fact, now that I think about it, I might as well bring it out and show it. I sadly have not delved into this yet, but this is an incredible thing that I found a year and a half, 2 years ago. It's King Kong, Peter Jackson's production diaries. It's Peter Jackson loves to also document production of his own films and stuff too. This is an incredible set here. Wow, like box and box. So here's a certificate of authenticity for the King Kong diaries here. And I think, and then a bunch of photos that follow, painted photos. I'm not going to take all those out.
For those that are listening to us via audio, it's like the whole King Kong, Peter Jackson King Kong thing that Kent has just comes in a suitcase, like sort of box, which
like
is
a chest
cool.
almost, except it's cardboard. And this is really fun. Here's this, but guess what? It's not a notepad per se. Although here, there's a big booklet on day 15, like it's a day-by-day shooting schedule with some posters. But it's a couple of DVD discs of the actual like production and putting together of Jackson's King Kong. And again, I would pick this up. because if you're a Kong fan, if you can find something like this within your price range, and I was able to find it reasonable, and as you guys have seen, like, this is a set that's in pretty good shape. I would pick it up, and as we will discuss a little bit later, I am a huge fan of his version of King Kong here. But
which I'm sort of a bit disappointed where a lot of people are sort of the overall or average response to his film has been a bit mediocre at best.
Yeah, I guess since we're already discussing and touching upon it a little bit, might as well kind of dive into that one a little bit, if not entirely. Yeah, really the main complaint I've heard from most fans is that the film is too long. I will say that to a certain degree there is some validity in that complaint, but I would argue myself personally that I don't feel those 3 hours a whole lot because I am so immersed into the world. And in fact, I've always said this, and I've said it numerous times on this podcast over the years, and it's probably sacrilegious to a lot of people. I find Peter Jackson's King Kong to be better than the original. And in fact, I would go and say it's the best King Kong movie so far.
And I think, too, with the amount of time as far, the whole runtime, I think it's also does its job as far as fleshing out the individual characters themselves to kind of know them personally in certain aspects of the film, kind of their motives, where they come from, and all that sort of thing. Even some of the side characters, which we won't see for too long in a film, for that instance. And I think that's the one thing about Peter Jackson's film is that he really dives into a lot of the characters. Even Kong himself, you kind of tend to get to relate to the character more than you would with the other past movies. I mean, compared to the 70s and 80s version of Kong.
I always cry though at the end of King Kong Lives because of how bloody his death is, and the fact that he dies right as his son is being that always, even as a kid, got me. Like, I hated that. Well,
his son was born, but then it's dies right in front of him there, along with Lady Kong.
Yeah, I know. Even as a kid, I remember when we would see that movie on Stars or we would rent the movie. It was hard for me to watch, even as a kid, and it's just as hard for me to watch that particular part of that movie as well. But we'll get to King Kong Lives in just a moment. Let's put Peter Jackson's Kong aside for a moment as well. So, we dove a little bit into it, but we're kind of all over the place. Let's kind of go in order in terms of movie release, kind of briefly do a little discussion on some of the films, and then wrap everything up with kind of Kong's legacy and kind of where he stands now and all that. But like I said earlier, about 6 months later, Son of Kong reached theaters, did pretty well financially, not as much as King Kong, but as we will discuss here in a couple weeks, a pretty underwhelming entry within the Kong-verse. I've seen this movie a number of times, and I will say that it's a unique story in the follow-up of the aftermath of King Kong, but the unfortunate aspect is that that particular part of the story involving Denim and having all these lawsuits, it's very short. And I would argue they spend way too much time on this one location involving some secondary characters that, yes, will come into play later, but building up some characters that are not very well written, doing some other things that really lull the movie. And once you get back to Skull Island, the amount of time you spend there, I think, is 10 or so minutes of this very short movie. And while the action scenes there are really good, the fact that this was rushed into production, as it shows in many areas, it makes for a very dull type of film, sadly.
Yeah.
Little Kiko, as the baby Kong is called sometimes, is very cute. He's very animated. It's more goofy than what you would get from the original Kong. I find it funny, though. There's one, if not two, scenes where I don't know if they realize it or not at the time, but Kiko's flipping them off.
Yeah.
And even flipping, I think, even the audience off at times. I find that kind of funny.
Yeah.
But
it's also pretty interesting too that they sort of went with an albino gorilla, whereas Kong, he's just, I mean, kind of has that blackish brown fur and everything. I don't know how genes and gorillas work. I don't know if it's sort of kind of a I don't know how to specifically say it, like some kind of genetic sort of thing that happens. I don't know, but we never know specifically what goes on behind the scenes. I mean, but yeah, as far as
Rampage character,
yeah, maybe Kiko is the grandfather or father to George. In Rampage.
No, because Skull Island ends up going into the ocean, sadly.
But yeah, as far as the budget, since we've talked about how rushed that this sequel was, the budget for this one was around $269,000, and then as far as the box office goes, it was at $616,000.
So very steep drop.
Yeah, very, very steep drop.
But here's the thing.
And it even made less in the box office compared to the budget that the first movie has received.
But here's the thing, and this is something that tends to get buried an awful lot when it comes to the discussion of how poorly Son of Kong did in relation to King Kong. I got a hair in my throat or something. The thing that keeps getting forgotten is that even while Son of Kong was released in theaters and playing, guess what? So still was King Kong.
Mm-hmm.
King Kong has had one of the longest theatrical runnings of all time. It was in theaters for years consecutively.
And I think
that hurt Son of Kong because, yeah, people would go and see a sequel. But I think once they realize, okay, it's not quite like King Kong, you're getting more action with King Kong, why not just go and see that one again? And it's not like today where a movie's in theaters for like 3 months and then it's gone. And then like 2 years down the road, approximately, you get a sequel. And that original movie obviously has been out of theaters for about 2 years. During the times before televisions and home video and streaming and all that, you would get some movies that would perpetually play in theaters. They would play in theaters maybe a couple months if they were mediocre films as far as financial results went. Others like King Kong that were very popular and continue to make a lot of money were in theaters really up until it was decided, okay, this isn't really making much money anymore to keep it in theaters. I mean, they decided, let's throw Son of Kong while our original movie's still playing in theaters.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guarantee you if they had pulled the original Kong and thrown Son of Kong out, Son of Kong would have done better. It wouldn't have done King Kong numbers. I am almost sure of that, but it would have done better.
But I mean, if that's sort of the route that they went, maybe just, I don't know if they had the double billing sort of thing back in the day, or have it be in the same theater. I'm not sure exactly what happened there, because I mean, if the original movie was in theaters for years, you would have thought to have seen at least posters of Son of Kong along with the King Kong posters side by side there, but not entirely sure if a lot of people just went to that movie, and then if there's any other movies during that time that were pretty good, and just this thing just sort of got buried, or if it had limited releases in select theaters, who knows.
My understanding is that double billing did not really become a thing until the 50s.
Gotcha.
Because you're talking post-war era, economic boom, baby boomers are coming along and are very young kids. That's when you get a lot of these major theater companies or motion picture companies like Warner Brothers and MGM. They create a bunch of smaller studios that create those B sci-fi horror films that end up becoming very cheap to make, but yet are very popular and are pretty decent money makers for these studios. And that's kind of when too you have the drive-ins as well. And that's how you get, double, if not even triple billing coming into vogue is from the post-war era, because America was rebuilding and was being owed a bunch of money from, allied countries, and then the rest of the globe itself was recovering from World War II. So it was the result of that. Not to mention, too, something that is worth noting is that in the late 40s, that's when the UFO boom happened as well, because of Roswell happened in the late 40s. And that's kind of when science fiction films really took off as well. And that's why the 50s and, throughout most of the 60s as well, you have a lot of alien and flying saucer type of films, excuse me, as well.
Yeah. I don't want to dive too much into Sonocon, because in a couple of weeks we're going to be coming in on that and sort of give our 2 cents on that. And then plus 10 years ago, when we did the 80th anniversary of King Kong, I think we sort of around that time kind of gave our 2 cents on it. I don't know if maybe one of these times revisit it if we want sometime down the road. But why don't we move on to your sort of favorite movie here, the 1976 King Kong film.
We're glossing over 2 films. We're glossing over King Kong versus Godzilla and King Kong Escapes.
Well, why don't we just kind of go with the American versions here first?
All right. 76 Kong. I understand for boomers, especially those that were kind of in their 20s and what have you, when this film came out, I can understand this being a what's the term, sort of a Hallmark film for you. I get it. I mean, I probably have a film that I consider to be a Hallmark movie for me that another generation would be like, really, that? Yeah. But personally, the 76 Kong movie, to try to be as objective as possible with it, it was a decent attempt at trying to remake the King Kong story for what was at that time the contemporary period. I think Charles Grodin, I love that actor, rest in peace. I love that actor an awful lot. He plays an incredible villain in that movie and in other films too, like the original Muppet movie.
In Beethoven movies.
He was a good guy in the Beethoven movies.
Yeah.
But it was a unique attempt. The Kong suit, and I think, was it Rick Baker who did the Kong suit and the special effects for that film? I don't remember.
Let's see here.
I don't dive into that movie a whole lot for obvious reasons. But
let me check.
And while Jason's looking that
up, Rick Baker, he plays as King Kong, the super.
I thought so, but I wasn't sure about that.
And then Peter Cullen, the voice of Optimus Prime, he did the voice of Kong.
Huh.
I did not know that.
I bet that made the throat sore after a few days.
My name is Optimus Prime.
My name is King Kong. I am in love with you, blonde-haired lady. But I think the Kong suit and the animatronics within the face and all that, I think it's very well done. I think some of the scenery is done pretty well. In a few spots, it looks bland.
The one scene where he's being brought in, kind of in that huge tall cage where he's standing there and then wearing the crown, and a couple of those shots there, it's the animatronic is quite stiff in a way.
I think, if I am not mistaken, that was a life-size built animatronic for that scene. That scene is so goofy as well. I mean, put him in
where he's just like standing
to his
there.
body. Yeah, and they put an actual crown on him, and he's confined on a gas pump display because it's this oil company that wanted to go to Skull Island because they think they discovered oil, and of course they do find out that there is oil on Skull Island as well. But it's so 1970s because it encapsulates the oil crises that was happening, if not about to happen, at that point in time. And it's sort of a funny thing to see for that time period. But the fight with the snake Kong ends up having on Skull Island, pretty dull. It should have been more amusing. And then on top of that, too, to me, the biggest problem with the film is that there just aren't a whole lot of other creatures featured. I mean, it would have been nice to see Kong go up against maybe 2 other creatures at least, to also have some other creatures attack our heroes as well. Jeff Bridges, I think, is a pretty good actor in the film. Gosh, the lady's name who
Jessica Lange.
Jessica Lange, yes. I, for many years, did not like her in the movie because I thought she was playing very ditzy and just stupid. And I always had a negative opinion of her through the lens of this movie. And I still don't care for her character. Every time I watch this movie, I'm like, Kong, just hold her like this and then go. I don't care for her in this movie, and I don't know. I just don't care for her character.
And the one thing that sort of stands out for me when it comes to this film is the poster itself. I mean, if you've seen the poster with Kong, where he's just like standing in between,
straddling on the Twin Towers, both the Twin Towers, where he has one leg on one of the Twin Towers and then a leg on the other 2. But it's like, if you were alive up to the point, I mean, you would know the distance in between when the 2 towers were still up. Not just that. They could have made Kong that size if they wanted to, but they didn't, because even in the movie, he goes from one of the towers and jumps over to the other one. And I'm like, that's not the Kong on the poster.
Yeah.
That's false
advertising.
Then
with the sheer size of how they display Kong on this poster, and as well, it's a lot of sizing issues with this poster. And then for whatever reason, I don't even know what the hell he's holding on. It looks like a freaking spaceship or something.
I thought, I was like, when I was growing up, and I thought it was a train. I thought he was holding a train.
I thought it was some sort of really crazy looking spaceship from outer space.
I bet even the artist doesn't know.
Yeah, it's like, I don't even know where you come up with this when it's not even in the movie. And also, it's like, it's a Santa Claus looking Kong that they make, because like the belly on Kong here makes him look really fat.
Well, it's still kind of during that period in which, when you look at some of the classic Godzilla posters, how goofy some of those were, not just from Japan, but even for U.S. releases or even international release, how so many of them from Germany included the name Frankenstein in them. I mean, it's so goofy, and that's one of the That's one of the fabulous things I have grown to love more about movie posters as I've gotten older with older movies, because I'm like, that thing is so hyperbolic. Like, that didn't happen in the movie, or that's not the actual size of this character, or this makes it seem like it's more entertaining. I mean, I'm so fascinated by old movie posters of like monster movies and sci-fi films and stuff, because they always, most of the time, exaggerate something about that particular film. And the 76 Kong, really, even though the movie, yeah, I mean, it's an older film. It's what, 40, going on 47 or something like that now. Yeah, going on 47 years old now. Yeah, for a film that's not quite 50, it still kind of plays into that whole notion of, we're going to give you something really grand, but in the movie, it's not exactly like that. But the movie, overall, it plays too long. I'm underwhelmed by it, because I think the movie, people complain about the runtime of the Peter Jackson Kong at being 3 hours for just the theatrical version. This movie is about 2.5 hours. And I really, every time I watch it, feel every aching second that this movie is on, because it's so pathetically slow. And part of it is because it's a movie of the times. The 70s were a very pessimistic time, and a lot of that stems from what was going on with the Vietnam War. And then on top of that as well, the economic boom period was basically coming to a close as well. And pollution was running rampant throughout cities. People were getting sick from smog and all sorts of stuff.
Crime.
And then government corruption as well. People were very cynical about their government. And you get this from a lot of films in the 70s. Most films in the 70s probably ran longer than they needed to. And as a result, were very ponderous in their pacing when they didn't really need to be. And this King Kong movie is no exception to that. And it's, to me, a dull, underwhelming film that, while it has a fantastic realization of King Kong, and Jeff Bridges is a pretty fun actor to watch, along with Charles Grodin, everything else is just meh. And I've seen the film probably a grand total of 6 or 8 times over the course of my life, and it's an underwhelming movie to me.
Yeah, so yeah, it's an okay movie. It's something that I wouldn't go out of my way to watch every time. It's just something that, if I had the feeling to maybe watch once in a great while, I probably would. And it's sort of the same thing with King Kong Lives here, with it being made 10 years after the 1976 remake, although they kind of make it like it was right after, because it sort of it starts off right after where the 1976 movie ends, where they have Kong kind of in this facility
in Atlanta. How they drag Kong from New York all the way to Atlanta.
And they do surgery on him, adding in an artificial heart in that regard, and then sort of brings him back to life in a way.
Here's the thing about this movie. I like it more than the 76 film, but I will freely admit King Kong Lives is a very problematic movie when it comes to logistics and elements of plot, meaning that, okay, it's funny that they happen to keep Kong alive long enough after he fell from the Twin Towers that, should have killed him instantly, but yet he's able to barely survive long enough for them to put together this massive artificial heart, which was brand new technology at the time. Even then, artificial hearts at best could keep a person alive for maybe a few months at best. So they put together this gigantic artificial heart, and even when you do something like this to a person, you need some blood transfusion because a person's going to lose a fair amount of blood, right? The tools they would need to kind of keep the creature alive while they're removing and placing in the heart, and then to put more blood in him as they're finishing up, where would they have found the other blood, right? Because in the movie, they don't discover Lady Kong until more or less after the fact. Now, granted, maybe I'm getting a few things mixed up because it has been a while since I've seen this film as well. But so it's a film that plays loose with the plot at points.
Yeah, so as you're going on as far as the blood transfusion, I was reading up on here that as far as the plot goes, that they were talking about how Kong was losing a lot of blood and that they needed blood badly. So then that they couldn't find another species with the same blood type matching Kong, and then however that's sort of where they find this one guy that was keeping an eye on what would be Lady Kong.
Yeah, it's a silly movie. I mean, and look, we're a podcast basically about silly movies.
Yeah.
And King Kong Lives is almost diametrically opposite of the 76 film. And I think that's pretty good because that 76 film, as I just mentioned a moment ago, is very dull in my opinion. And King Kong Lives, you can rightfully bash it for a lot of issues, but it's a more entertaining film than that 76 film, and it moves along fast enough to where you're by and large entertained most of the time. I get a little queasy anymore watching that operation at the beginning of the movie again.
And then when he snaps one of the bad guys in half and then eating the other half of one dude, that sort of also grosses me out in a bit.
I get disturbed by that part more than anything else, but the whole surgery thing grosses me out. And then of course, like I said, at the ending of the film, I get really sad. I mean, again, I'm like, damn it, Dino De Laurentiis, why do you have to I understand, yes, you gotta kill him or whatever and you use tanks and whatever, but do you have to have it to where he just gushes blood all over the place and just gets the living snot kicked out of him? And then he dies right in front of his kid, and it just like I said, for years that always bugged me. I still, even thinking about it right now, I'm almost on the verge of tears because it's such a sad moment. It gets me basically every time.
And then as far as the poster goes for this one is far more action packed than what's actually shown in the movie. It sort of reminds me some kind of a Rambo-esque type of poster.
That's one of the versions of the poster
with a lot of explosions, and then on this poster, it sort of has kind of a weird tagline for it. It goes by, "America's biggest hero is back, and he is not happy."
Well, Dino De Laurentiis was very much, I mean, you could get into a whole podcast about him, but he was a very exaggerated, hyperbolic individual himself. And then, I mean, you could even get into the whole rights issue involving King Kong and how De Laurentiis himself was not only able to make the first Kong movie, but even this film and how problematic it was with the legal issues with licensing and crap. I'm not going to get into that because you're better off going to read that elsewhere, because I'm not a lawyer and it gets so complicated. Not to mention I didn't even do any research on that for this podcast anyway. Is because to me, I didn't think that was important for this, but
and then it would just be a really
it's
long.
Interesting in and of itself.
Yeah, it would just be a really long podcast, almost rivaling the year-end special,
the longest ever.
Yeah, so
it's a badge of honor.
So with that, what's that?
Hey, I'm not fully properly dressed for this.
To me, that seems a little bit overdressed.
It's real stuff.
So we're kind of getting back to the 2005 con here after, was it about close to 20 years after the King Kong Lives movie. So this is kind of, you can say, more or less a proper version of a King Kong movie, practically going back to kind of the original story with the original characters from the 1933 movie here, and I think Peter Jackson, with how he's done with the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, where he just sort of recently came off of the whole success of that trilogy and going into King Kong here. I think he was a perfect fit to direct and make this remake of the 1933 version of King Kong and bringing it back to more of a modernized retelling of the character himself.
Yeah, I mean, again, for the umpteenth time again, this is not only my favorite King Kong movie, I truly believe it is the best King Kong movie. The 33, look, I'm not taking anything away from the 33 film or any of the others, well, except for maybe the 76 one. But the 33 one, look, I mean, it really was a groundbreaker for filmmaking of the time period, and many films would go on to do similar things with what that movie. I'm not trying to take anything away from that movie. It's a blockbuster. It is one of the most one of the more cornerstone type of films in the history of cinema, and it rightfully deserves to be there, just like Jurassic Park deserves to be a cornerstone film as well because of the technological advances at that time, plus the representation of the dinosaurs for that film as well. But Peter Jackson's film, I think, does the 33 film better. You can, I know some people didn't think Jack Black belonged there. For a while, I thought the same thing. But
same with me too.
Yeah, but the more I've watched the film, the more I realize the character of Carl Denham fits Jack Black and what he's able to do very well. A very Weasley, sniveling con man. And he does a pretty good job. Once in a great while when I watch the movie, I get a little off with him. But the more I've watched the movie over the years, the more I truly believe Jack Black was a very good choice for Carl Denham. Adrian Brody,
I would say
that's a bit of an off choice too, but
yeah, I was sort of the same way too when it came to Adrian Brody, because it seemed like he didn't quite fit in with the movie, or my mind just didn't quite go along with him being part of this movie. But I think as years go by, I think my mind sort of is starting to accept him being part of this movie. But I don't know what the deal is, but just at first I just wasn't sure, like, if maybe find someone that could be maybe portraying a little bit better within this movie. So
Here's the thing. I think I figured out what the problem we have with Adrian Brody with this movie. His Jack Driscoll is a playwright in this version, and I think he comes off very well as a guy would be a playwright. Here's the thing, though. When you look at Adrian Brody and you look at his physical stature, you don't think of him as a hero. You don't think of him as someone that is going to be swinging a sword, shooting a gun, swinging from vine to vine, being the hero to save the day. On top of that, too, similar, like if you've seen the end of the movie Predators, he is bulked up and he more or less performs an Arnold Schwarzenegger type of combat sequence with the Predator in the end of that movie. It's basically because Brody himself, through choices in his acting career, but also, let's face it, just because of how he looks in his stature, even if he bulks himself up like he did in Predators, he doesn't come off as this action hero. And part of that is our fault because we have been fed and as a result led to believe your heroes are your Stallones, your Schwarzeneggers, your Van Dammes, your Lundgrens, all that stuff. And a scrawny guy like Adrian Brody, whose Jack Driscoll is a playwright, is not going to be adventuresome. You may have a point to some extent, but...
And that's why I would have thought with Kyle Chandler, who was also in this movie, which we'll sort of revisit him again soon enough. But yeah, with Kyle Chandler being in a movie, you would think with his stature and kind of that whole 1930-esque appearance, kind of what you were talking about, you would think that he would have been kind of that sort of person to fit the role of Driscoll.
Yeah, I think he maybe would have. But again, similar to Jack Black, the more I watch the movie, the more I buy into Brody. It still is a bit off, but to me it's not off so much to the point to where I think to me, it's not like it would be like, let's say, Steve Buscemi playing as He-Man in the 87 Masters Universe. Like, it's something like that. That's something that would totally and forever take me out of that movie if that had happened. But it's, you know, it's not, like I said, it's not a lot to... It's not enough to, like, get me out of the movie and just be like, I do not buy this. I do not buy it. That's not it. But the realization of Kong in this film, too, I think is spectacular because this is the first time in the history, and I think even since this Peter Jackson film, that Kong is more gorilla. He spends an awful lot of his time on his fours rather than being upright like he is for a vast majority of these other films. And I love the fact, too, that this is a Kong that has visibly been not just around for a long time, but weathered, been in fights, scarred, beaten, and that sort of thing.
Well, and with the Skull Island environment, which the movie itself does really great to kind of tell the story of the island itself and kind of see the environment. Even the villagers in this one, you kind of tell with the villagers how they react, how they're portrayed, and just with the environment of Skull Island too, it sort of matches with how this version of Kong looks.
That is the biggest issue I have with this movie, is the portrayal of the villagers in this film. I remember when we watched it in theaters, and every time I watch it now, this is the biggest problem I have with Peter Jackson's King Kong are the villagers.
Yeah, I was sort of disappointed with how they portrayed the villagers within this one. It's like it just seems like it wouldn't be like, I don't know how like with how they wanted them to portray the villagers, it just seems off-putting in a way, like with Kong Skull Island, which we'll get to here in a bit. I think that was a more of an appropriate portrayal of the villagers.
Yeah. Like I said, to me, the villagers in Peter Jackson's film are portrayed as stereotypical savages. But I would even go so far as a result of that stereotype, it's probably borderline, if not outright racist. Because this is a portrayal that was going on, you know, in older films. You could even argue to some degree the islanders or villagers in the 33 film were portrayed in a very stereotypical African-American way that most whites thought blacks were during that time. I don't have an issue with the villagers being people who are like, you know, not really beaten down, but sort of like on edge on living on this island with not just a giant ape, but giant creatures of all sorts as well. But to the part where they end up being so savage and violent, to me, makes no sense and just doesn't fit. Not just because of what's come before, but it just doesn't make sense either in terms of what you would want for something like that in a film like this, because the villagers are a nice bridge from your common man, let's just go ahead and say it, the white guys visiting the island, to coming on to Skull Island. The villagers sit in the middle where they're kind of that bridge connecting the two. In the original Kong movie, they help to set up in a roundabout way who Kong is to some degree. They help tease the audience more of what he's like and what he is. Here, that's not it. These villagers more or less are like demented slashers. But they don't fit.
I can sort of understand, because kind of on their part on Skull Island here, where they used to have some kind of civilization, but then that part of Skull Island somehow just, like, you can see when the buildings and stuff during the time whenever they were built, and then the land itself, like, you can see huge, like, frictions of the earth, and like large chunks of it have broken off or fallen into the ocean. Like, there could have been some sort of thing that had happened back in the history of Skull Island where something probably catastrophic on that part of the island sort of happened majorly with this part of the land where the villagers were on, and then maybe being bombarded with like a lot of these creatures. I mean, you can probably sort of maybe understand how they started to become part of who they became now, where, like, with a lot of psychological things happening to them, both nature and things that have happened over the years, like with civilization collapse, that, like, sort of madman sort of mindset starts to come in and play, which can, I would say, sort of makes sense in a way. But
no, yeah, I mean, I have no disagreement with the fact that living on an island like that, where weather conditions, and then living on this island that, yeah, like you said, probably has earthquake activity maybe, but then more than anything else has all these giant prehistoric creatures on it, even though it looks like they have them contained for the most part. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that living on a place like that would kick the crap out of you, of course. My biggest problem is just, it makes no sense that a group of people like that would turn savage against other people. That just doesn't make sense to me, because this looks like a group of people who have been on an island, and it seems as if no one else from the outside world has come and visited them. Like, it doesn't seem like they've had contact with the modern world, and it just doesn't make sense with them behaving that way towards other people. I can see them being depressed and striving to get food and just being on edge because they're living on an island with dinosaurs and Kong. Like, that can mess with your mind. But to be savages to other people, to me, that's kind of where it crosses a line.
But I think it also makes sense now that I think when it comes to like an actual situation that's currently does exist, where I don't know if you heard this one island that's just maybe close to either, was it India or Bangladesh, where this island is part of India, where it's called Sentinel Island, where you have a tribe there that really has not really had any contact at all, and there are some people that have tried to make some contact, but they actually got killed by some of these tribal people on this one lone small island there. And have watched some videos on it. It's pretty interesting in a way, but it sort of makes sense in a way.
Yeah, and maybe so. I guess maybe for this specifically Kong story, the villagers have played a key transition in helping the outside white folk kind of get connected with Kong. And that's not the role that they play here. And like I said, to me, it's disturbing because I think the portrayal is a stereotype of black people, which also is borderline racist. And I have a little bit of an issue with that portrayal. I think, like I said, I have no problems if you want to have these people on edge because of the conditions that they live with. But to make them like they did, I think just being violent and killing people and to me is a bridge too far for what the Kong story is about.
Yeah. So why don't we move on from?
By the way, there's one thing I really want to hit upon the Jackson Kong that I think is very, very, very important. It is the connecting of the audience with Kong and Anne's relationship with Kong. No other Kong movie, and maybe the 76 film was about the closest thing, and even then it didn't do it as well as what Peter Jackson did in terms of you have obviously Anne being frightened and wanting nothing to do obviously with this 25-foot ape. But then over the course of the movie you begin to realize, and she begins to realize, that Kong, with her specifically, and maybe because she is a blonde, I don't know, but he means her no harm, that he loves her and he just wants to be with her, and he's going to do everything he can, including risking his life numerous times, to protect her. And you get to see that better. It's because it's over a period of 3 hours. I think it's done very, very well. It is gradual. You start off with this, with Anne being frightened and wanting nothing to do with Kong, to slowly, like by movie's end, she does love Kong in the sense of like, this is a sweet animal that, yeah, like anyone else or any other animal, you push the right buttons, you're going to piss them off. And yeah, bad things are going to happen. And it's other people's fault that this is going on. Or even in the case of Skull Island proper, it's other dinosaurs' fault that, like they're coming after Anne and or Kong at the same time. But I love this relationship and how it's moves along, how it progresses and changes over the course of the movie. And one of my favorite shots of the movie is on Skull Island. I think it's after like the big Vistastosaur fights. They go to the top, and I think it's by his lair, and they see the sun setting, and he Kong puts Ann down, and you get this nice James Newton Howard score playing in the background, and Kong just goes, meaning beautiful, and it's so, like, it brings tears to my eyes because you see Kong, he's not really a violent dude. This is a guy who was in an environment that just happens to be violent, and in order to survive, he's had to do the same. But you can tell he's not a bad dude. And one of my other favorite scenes of the film is when they're in New York City, and he and Anne are sliding along this pond in Central Park. And one of my favorite pieces of music by James Newton Howard for this movie plays, and they're having fun, Kong and Anne sliding around on this frozen pond and hitting snowbanks and things like that. Like, it almost brings tears to my eyes because it's so lovely, because you realize here are two individuals. It's not love like in a husband and wife sort of thing. Don't be going there if you're some type of pervert. That's not what I'm talking about. It's like a love you would have for like a really good friend or like a beloved pet. And there's this respect and this love that you have for that other individual. And then it gets me. People had talked about how Kong, when he dies at the 33 film, some people cried, and maybe they did. To me, I don't cry on that one because the way it's portrayed, it's not played out like that. But here, it's played out in a way to where you've gotten to know Kong. You get to know Kong more in this movie than maybe just about any other Kong movie ever. And you see the evolution of his and Anne's relationship. And you realize this dude is not some type of 100% 24/7 violent individual. That's not who he is at his core. And when he gets shot up on top of the Empire State Building, thankfully not in a bloody way, but it's so sad how it's portrayed. It gets me to tears. I cry at the end of King Kong Lives, and I cry at the end of this film when he gets shot up, and you see in the final moments when he's on top of the Empire State Building, there's this moment where like Anne's standing in front of him, and he's just kind of hunkered over part of the top there because he's been shot up so much. And it looks like they're about ready to have a moment. Like, I think they're about ready to touch or something like that. But then a plane comes in and shoots like a number of more bullets in his back, and he just kind of grimaces a little bit more. And then you just start to see this look in his face, like the life is going out. I'm starting to tear up a little bit as I'm talking about this. And he gets shot up, and then he just slumps off the building, and you see him in slow motion fall down. Oh my gosh. I mean, you talk about heartbreaker. I mean, even my son Lincoln is at a point where he hates the ending to King Kong Lives, and he hates the ending to this Peter Jackson one because both endings disturb him as well. I mean, it gets me every time. And Peter Jackson did one hell of a job with getting the audience to know Kong better and getting the audience to understand the relationship between Anne and Kong better, to where you get that connection better here than any other Kong film made before or after. I mean, I will go to my grave defending that part of this film.
So now let's jump on to 2017.
Oh, and I got one more thing. No.
Let's just move on.
I know I'm messing around.
So moving on to 2017's Kong Skull Island, whereas this one, it's pretty interesting how they set the setting for this Kong to be around the Vietnam War times. It's part of the whole monsterverse, whereas with the two Godzilla films where they were kind of set in the modern times, but this one is the only film in the monsterverse where it's just telling its story kind of back in time to get a better story and set up Khan himself, and to kind of show him not just as maybe like a 50-foot or 25-foot gorilla, but more as a like 100 some odd foot creature and still growing just at a young age and everything, leading up to the next film after this one. But with Kong Skull Island here, it seems with this one you get more of a history or more of a backstory telling of the island itself compared to the other past films. Although the Peter Jackson one also does a detailed backstory of Skull Island itself here, and with this one too, you get newer creatures in here. It's sort of a retelling, but a more of a newer, fresher take on the character itself. Different telling, different characters this time, with especially being in Vietnam War times here. Yep. And then you have newer creatures as far as the skull crawlers in this one, instead of just your traditional dinosaurs and everything. You get a little bit more of the mutated, weird looking kaiju in this one this time. Although you sort of get some of the traditional ones when it came to the giant octopus in one of the scenes in this film, but you get newer, really odd looking creatures in Kong Skull Island.
Yeah, and again, I might be stepping on some people's toes, but this is what I truly think about the film. I've seen a lot of people who say they really love this movie, and some even think it's the best of the MonsterVerse. I can understand to some degree why some people believe that. I do think the cast in this movie is pretty darn good for the most part. It's not, in my opinion, 100% like superb acting, but it's pretty darn close. And the cast, in terms of, like, you got John Goodman, Brie Larson,
Samuel L. Jackson.
I'm sure I'm probably forgetting like a couple other people. Yeah, it's a very good cast. However, and I don't have a problem actually with the film not being a retread of the 30s film. I think part of it is because we got that relatively recently with Peter Jackson's Kong. You would get people really bored and tired of that, and the movie, I think, financially would have suffered if you had done a retread.
Yeah. And it's a nice, fresher take on the character and the whole story itself.
Yeah, and I don't mind the fact that, there's kind of that Vietnam War undertone where it does play a part in how this movie and its characters unfold and handle certain situations. And thank God it's not about someone trying to go find oil. Thank God. But this movie, in my opinion, I still think it has a similar problem to the 76 film in that there was incredible opportunity to include Kong battling more creatures, and again, we just don't get that here. Yes, we got a really good skull crawler fight at the end, and you get that brief sequence of him fighting a couple smaller skull crawlers in about the middle of the film. But this film really missed out on an opportunity to, give us more of that, and then also to even show a few more creatures. I feel like, again, another Kong film missed out on an incredible opportunity that could have made itself a little bit more entertaining. Yeah, maybe you could have argued it would have made it even more goofy, but it's like, look, this is what these movies are about. These aren't movies that are necessarily going to win you Best Picture awards or anything like that. These are films for people to escape for a few hours and to have fun. And why not give them that fun? And I have a problem with that again with this film. There's just not enough Kong fighting other creatures, let alone just a variety of creatures. I just think that the film drags in a few spots as well. There could have been more going on. There's some philosophical ponderances at points too that I just don't think are really necessary either. And it's still a good film. I like it, but I don't think it's as good as what some say it is.
Yeah, and I mentioned this about this too, but I think with this movie, it just kind of dives more to the island itself. It just seems like there, the director, I forget his name, who made the movie, that I think he was trying to show more of the island itself and trying to make it more of a character and just to kind of show everything, like the daily life of Skull Island. Here, you know, you got the villagers, and then you have John C. Reilly's character when he's been kind of stranded on this island for many years since World War II.
Like 30 years just about, I think.
Yeah, and kind of get the backstory of him and everything else that's happening on this island too. So it's just kind of breathing life into the island itself here. It's more than just focusing on Kong a lot, even though it's, you know,
it's supposed to be a Kong film.
I mean, you got the main billing with Kong's name in it first, and then you got Skull Island second after his name. But I mean, probably kind of trying to mix the two together, kind of trying to understand not only Kong but Skull Island as well.
Well, in order to do that, though, you need to have fauna. And the fauna representation, I would say, is underrepresented in the film. I don't mind the giant insects. And I've said before, giant insects in certain films, to me, are kind of a cheap out for like a monster film. And I love the skull crawlers. I think the creation of those is incredible. The problem is that there's just not enough variety here. And like I said, there's not like having Kong battle even one or two other animals. Yeah, he steps on an octopus, but I don't even count that. But just having Kong battle a couple other creatures and showing us more fauna, I think could have helped that, because the execution of the life of everyday Skull Island, I would say, looks, with some areas of the island, more or less pretty quiet. Like I feel like this version of Skull Island, for the most part, I could probably walk across and probably be okay. Like I feel safer on this version of Skull Island than I do the 33 film, and even some of the other versions, and especially Peter Jackson's Skull Island is like wanting to kill you with every step. But even the 76 version was, I would say the 76 version is the safest Skull Island, but this is a very close second.
Yeah, because you don't hardly have anything present.
There's nothing there other than Kong and that one giant snake.
Yeah.
And a bunch of oil.
Yeah.
But it's not a bad film.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's this grand spectacle that many say it is. I like it for the most part, but it's not my favorite of the MonsterVerse, and it's fine. It's fine.
So let's jump on to 2021's Godzilla vs. Kong, which this was the movie I've always thought about for many years, that like it should at least happen, kind of redo or remake the 1962 version of King Kong vs. Godzilla. And fortunately enough, we get exactly what I was hoping for in Godzilla vs. Kong here. And with everything, I mean, just kind of even though it has some of its issues here and there, it's a really entertaining film. It kind of basically delivers what it's meant to do.
I'm more or less going to harken back to a lot of what I said when we originally discussed this film almost 2 years ago. And that is, when I first saw this movie, I really was like, oh crap, I don't think I am enjoying this. And I'm like, this isn't what I had hoped it would be. And I've seen the movie like 27 times since then. And yeah, I've grown to like it an awful lot with repeated viewings. With all of that being said, however, I will still say this. This is not the Godzilla vs. Kong movie I would have made. I think this movie is too silly in many respects. I was hoping for something more serious, but I guess I should have tossed that out the window after I realized King of the Monsters sort of took more of a Toho-esque route, because the 2014 film is one of my all-time favorite Godzilla films, and one of the many reasons why I like that movie is that it takes the subject matter more seriously. And on some level, I do like the silliness of this film, because again, it's a giant lizard versus a giant ape with a few other goofy creatures mixed in. You know, some would argue, and I think to some degree rightfully so, you need to make it silly, but that's not what I was hoping for, even though, again, I've grown to like it more with each viewing. I still have issues with it. Again, every time I watch it, there is still a small part of me that is disappointed with the tone of the film and the direction it overall went with its story. I'm still a little disappointed that especially the ending fight is as short as it is between both Godzilla and Kong. I was hoping for something longer, considering these are the two biggest screen icons of all time, arguably. I have an issue with the fact that Godzilla looks like an absolute wuss against Mechagodzilla. I mean, that's fine if you want Mechagodzilla to be more powerful than Godzilla. I have no problem with that. But the fact that Godzilla just continues to get his butt handed to him, no, I have an issue with that. And the fact, too, that I think some of the comedy is just a wee bit too much at points. And Godzilla is not quite in it as much as I believe he should. And that's quite a laundry list. Again, to me, that doesn't damn the movie, but it hurts it a little bit. And I still find it entertaining. It's still a fun film to watch, but it's not what I was hoping for.
I can sort of understand with how they sort of went with the direction, because a lot of people relate to Kong more than they do with Godzilla, because with apes and humans, they're sort of related in that regard. So, and I really like how they expanded the lore of Kong more, where he's like kind of see kind of the backstory of
Hollow Earth,
Hollow Earth, and where he actually came from in this
with all the Titans, actually.
Yeah, with this huge mountain, kind of with his actual layer of his ancestors, and kind of this battle between him and Godzilla, for that matter. And I just sort of like how they expanded more of the lore of not only Kong but Hollow Earth, and kind of exploring Hollow Earth practically for the very first time, and kind of seeing how it sort of looks. And I would like to see
a
more
very
of it.
safe Hollow Earth, by the way.
And I would like to see more of Hollow Earth in the upcoming sequel to the movie here, which fortunately is going to be coming out in actually about a year. I think a year this coming Wednesday, if I'm correct. So we got not too far away from it.
Here's the funny thing about that is that you would think I would be really excited about it, but I'm not. I mean, I'm apathetic. I really am. I'm apathetic. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's kind of cool. Like, I'm not. It wasn't like with all these MonsterVerse films when I was getting really excited. But for me, it's like, oh, we get another Godzilla and Kong movie. Okay, like.
I'm guessing you're getting that Marvel fatigue after Endgame.
I got tired of Marvel like back in 2013 or 2014. Marvel has bigger issues, but I don't know. Maybe there could be some oversaturation, even though it's only been 4 movies. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Maybe there's a part of me too that, and I don't know, maybe it could be because I am busy in most of my day-to-day life that it's just hard for me to like concentrate on something like that like I used to when I didn't have kids or something like that. Maybe that's part of it. You know, maybe part of it too is I'm just older and it's harder for me to get excited about things, which sucks. I'm not going to lie, because I remember being a kid and like, again, like you and I have talked about several times on this podcast, when we saw that New Year's Eve promo for the 98 Godzilla movie and how like pissed our pants happy we were about that. I mean, you know, I'm old as shit now, and I've thought about this many times over the last like 5 or 10 years. I'm like, it's hard for me to get very excited about things anymore, and it's because I've lived enough life that it's like, okay. I mean,
I would say the one thing that is really getting me excited recently is the upcoming Super Mario Brothers movie, since with us growing up with that video game for God knows how long, is like after many years since the last movie made back in the early 90s, 93 actually, I think. But yeah, that's probably one of the only things I'm looking forward to this year.
Right now, side note, if for both Lincoln and I, it's Creed 3, 65, Shazam 2, and Super Mario.
By the way, I was gonna ask you one of these times if you've gotten the chance to see the third Creed movie.
Not yet, no.
But I know I want to get around to at least seeing the 65 movie, and maybe one of these times, if you want to do some kind of discussion on that movie.
Oh yeah, yeah. But, okay, here's the thing. We were talking about how I'm an old fart and how it's hard for me to get excited about things. When you initially told me about this odd number of months ago and you were saying it's like Planet of Dinosaurs, that's what got me excited. I'm like, no way. Like, they actually are remaking this obscure early 80s dinosaur movie. Like, I'm going, oh, I don't think it's that, but that's what got me initially excited.
It's sort of like Planet of the Dinosaurs in a way, as far as the premise with like you have a person or people in this spaceship going on to a planet, but this one here where they somehow go back 65 million years ago on Earth.
Yeah, well, the other planet was it was like Earth, but it wasn't Earth.
Yeah,
and again, I don't know. I don't know if this is a similar premise or not. But yeah, back to Kong.
Yeah, or Godzilla versus Kong here. But with this one, I in the back of my mind when this was announced, like I sort of had a gut feeling that there has to be like another main villain to have these two sort of team up, because like with how King Kong vs. Godzilla was, like I don't think something like that isn't gonna really fly by in this day and age. It's like there has, like, with the recent trend over the years when it came to these remade or rebooted movies or remakes of some of these versus movies,
or just a crossover,
that it's like there's always another villain in there, to where that you have these that other forces that were kind of going against one another all of a sudden team up and defeat this common villain. In a way, it's like in my gut feeling that there's going to have to be something for both Godzilla and Kong sort of teaming up to defeat, in a way. And that's what we get with a pretty good designed Mechagodzilla way. And as far as some of the, as far as my take on Mechagodzilla here, I think it's one of the better looking Mechagodzillas and more of a realistic version, in a way, compared to the other Mechagodzillas made by Toho, in a way. And it's a really OP'd Mechagodzilla too. Very OP'd.
Well, the thing that saddens me about Godzilla vs. Kong in terms of how it was going to turn out, first and foremost, some asshole already spoiled the fact that Mechagodzilla very likely was going to be in it anyways. And the trailers, to some degree, very quickly, though, tease that. But not only that, we've had this history of other films. We had Freddy vs. Jason. We've had 2 Alien vs. Predator films. And I'm sure there may have been like 1 or 2 other films in there somewhere that I'm not remembering. But yeah, there was never a clear-cut winner. Never really was. You could argue, like, yeah, in a sense, maybe Jason won and Freddy vs. Jason, but then you have the Freddy head, like, winking at the audience and then laughing. You know, the Alien versus Predator, you have the Queen Alien drowning, but then the Predator warrior himself dies moments later. Alien versus Predator 2, both are taken out in a nuclear blast. You know, and I remember even saying this months before the film was even released. I remember saying the ending is going to be obscure, and then very likely, yes, they will come together to team up to fight something else, because they're not going to, even though, again, you could argue Godzilla won both, and I do believe that's true. I think the film to some degree makes that relatively clear enough, especially in the first fight. The second fight, yeah, the stomping on the chest and walking away, it's pretty clear Godzilla won that, but you knew it was not going to be like one ends up dead while the other one walks away. Like, that's not how it is, and we've seen this time before with the other movies I mentioned earlier, and the fact, too, that similar things have happened in the Toho Godzilla films as well. And on the one hand, part of me was okay with that because I do like both, even though I was heavily rooting for Godzilla in this one. But at the same time, I'm sort of sick of that whole thing being played out because it's so predictable at this point. And I understand why, because you have big fan bases, passionate fan bases of both. You don't want to really piss off one or the other. I get that. But
yeah,
I don't know.
And then with a lot of articles saying, "Oh, who's gonna win? Who's gonna die?" and all that stuff. It's like, let's just be realistic. I mean, if you've seen a lot of the movies over the years with the same scenario, pitting one against another with popular IPs, like what you said with Freddy vs. Jason, Alien vs. Predator, so on and so forth, it just doesn't really turn out with a clear winner or one of them dying off in that regard. So it's just going to be that way when it comes to these versus movies nowadays, when it comes to pitting popular IPs with one another. It's going to be the same way when someday down the road when Toho finally decides to pick Godzilla up against Gamera. Whenever that's going to be, who knows?
I remember yelling like what we were talking about. Oh, this site was talking about who's going to win, and we're screaming like, there's not going to be a clear-cut winner. Stop it. Like, yeah. They're both going to live. They're both going to team up against something. It's just a question of who. Even though we kind of had an inkling it was going to be Mechagodzilla, we weren't 100% sure. We're like, you know, yes, it would be nice if there was a clear-cut winner. And like I said, yes, to some degree, the film more or less says Godzilla did win, but it's not. Kong would have died without the main characters using the heave to jumpstart him again. But it's just like, come on, guys. Let's get real here. I know you're trying to maybe build up hype or something. Stop it. Like, let's be real here. But yeah.
Oh well. So let's just kind of speed things up a little bit, but also backtrack a little bit and kind of get into a couple of the Toho versions of a couple of King Kong movies. Starting out with King Kong vs. Godzilla, where sort of the first bout between the two popular IPs, where they come across one another's paths for the first time here. And it's also kind of, and you know, you've sort of gotten our takes from it in the past, where we've just, you know, we've recently delved into it a little bit in our year end here just a couple months ago, as far as both the American and the Japanese versions here, and sort of the goofiness with that film, both the US and Japanese versions. But as far as the two differences between the two, the Japanese one, I think, is a little bit better, and you don't get like kind of that ridiculous science guy in the US version, you know, with the white hair and everything.
Don't be a Dr. Arnold Johnson.
Yeah. And this one, with the Japanese version, you get more of what's going on, and how it's being built up into, because in some instances with the US version, the film is kind of cut in ways where it's like some things just don't quite match up with one another, but also it sort of makes sense with the US version to kind of tell the story from the perspective of some of these TV reporters or UN, whatever kind of reporters they were. But with the Japanese version, it lays the groundwork to how things go in their own way, and so on and so forth, where it makes a lot more sense in that way. And I sort of, after seeing the Japanese version literally for the first time after so many years, I tend to like more that version more than the US version, a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the film is very interesting. Both versions are. The one thing that is pretty universal amongst fans of these types of movies is that, unfortunately, the Kong suit is awful. It's not made very well, and
I would say the same thing when
arm extensions in various scenes.
I would say the same thing when it came to the King Kong Escapes suit.
I would argue it's a bit better, but yeah, it still has problems, especially when that suit gets in water. That's where that suit really fails.
Particularly the head part. it just sort of looks goofy in a way. Whereas
and the body, like it droops more and it contours of the actor's body more.
Whereas the head for this film here, I tend to like it more as far as the head version goes. But yeah, when it comes to like the water scenes with the suit, it's the same way when it comes to like King Kong Escapes suit, where it just does not look quite as good.
Yeah. King Kong versus Godzilla is basically a comedy. Decent movie. I think both versions. I think when we discussed, when we had our year-end discussion here a few months back, I think I said that the Japanese film is better, but I think the American film has a better viewing experience for people. You know, I think if you're a fan of this, both have to be watched, obviously. I mean, anytime you get two different versions of a Godzilla film, you should watch both.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as King Kong goes in King Kong versus Godzilla, it is fairly King Kong centric, but I would argue it handles Godzilla better than Godzilla versus Kong did. You get more Godzilla sequences in this movie than you do the 21 film.
Yeah.
But Kong, still is more or less the main character of the two. And his representation is fairly good. It in many respects is sort of almost a carbon copy of the 33. You got the natives and all that, except this time they had a sleeping berry juice.
And then also on a different
exploited
island.
again.
And then on a different island here besides Skull Island here.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure why they do a different island here. There's probably some sort of reason behind it, but I'm guessing that they wanted something a little bit different. Who knows? But yeah, it's a pretty comedic with, you know, the human characters in King Kong vs. Godzilla here. And also, again, just like Godzilla vs. Kong, you don't really have a clear winner at the very end of this movie. You don't know who actually wins or loses, or obviously no one dies in here. You may think, not seeing Godzilla at the very end, some people might think, oh, he died. That's not really the case here in that regard. But yeah, it's a pretty decent film for its time. It would have been nice if they would have done it a bit more serious than just having it be more comedic in a way. And then, like what Ken said, with there being two versions of the film, it's better to watch both versions to kind of get your take and viewing experience, to see the differences between the U.S. version and as well as the original Japanese version of this film.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
So why don't we try to wrap up with Kong Escapes here, and then after that, kind of give our take as far as the legacy of Kong here, and then just kind of wrap up after that. So
yeah. Okay.
Oh, you go ahead.
King Kong Escapes, a film that when the first few times I saw it, I was ho-hum about it. Part of me going in wasn't necessarily expecting anything grand to begin with, but because it was King Kong, I was hoping maybe it would be. But I knew for a while, I was like, it's okay. It's cartoony. It's goofy. But then, like I've mentioned numerous times before, when I had a resurgence in my Godzilla fandom here a while back, I got to a point to where I could appreciate more of the childish and goofier films within the series. And I've gotten to the point more with King Kong Escapes that, yeah, even though it's a film that has a lot of problems with it, it's still a really good, fun film. And yeah, I just yeah, I really yeah, I really enjoy it.
Yeah, and sort of the storytelling that they have for this, you know, with the Element X, and then you have this, this, what's this? I'm trying to think of a term for this, or name, kind of this organization, in a way, trying to retrieve Element X, and then using this machine version of King Kong in a way, which is pretty interesting, and just everything leading up to it, with the final bout between both Khan and Mechanicon up toward, you know, up to the Tokyo Tower there. It's a pretty interesting movie with a pretty unique storytelling with pretty good characters. You know, you got Akira Takarada, Linda Miller, and then always forget the one older guy's name, plays Doctor
Yamamoto.
Yeah. He's always pretty interesting in his own right. I always like to see him playing as a villain, because I think he always does a good villain characters in his own right. But yeah, King Kong Escapes, it's a pretty unique film. I'm not sure if there was really any need to really make the movie. I'm not entirely sure, but it's a.
Is there a need to make any movie?
It's a pretty good entry into the King Kong universe.
Yeah, it's a fun movie. I mean, I mean, it's a fun movie. It does what it's supposed to do. It entertains.
So, yeah, why don't we just kind of touch upon the legacy here, and then just sort of close out. But so yeah, as far as the legacy of Kong, I would say the obvious thing I would have to say is that if King Kong wasn't made in 1933, like, if he wasn't made, then you wouldn't have like a lot of these other monster movies, especially Godzilla, probably not have been made to begin with. Because with Godzilla, you know, with Tomoyuki Tanaka, you know, it's like he gotten some inspiration to make Godzilla because of the 1933 King Kong movie, in that he wanted to make his own sort of monster movie, but he just didn't know what to do until he figured out what he wanted as far as what kind of monster movie he wanted to make. So without King Kong, we wouldn't have gotten anything today. We wouldn't have been here talking about the whole kaiju genre. If it wasn't for King Kong, it wouldn't be really much of a kaiju genre anyway.
Yeah, I mean, King Kong is arguably one of the most popular screen icons of all time, despite the fact that his library is a pale imitation to what Godzilla has. But there's a reason why Kong is so very popular. I mean, Toho so badly was trying to get Kong in on Godzilla to have him fight, and there's a reason why they wanted to do even more King Kong movies with the license.
Uh-oh. Looks like Kent got frozen up here, because his bar is a bit not good in a way. I'm probably going to have to send him a message here. I'm guessing his internet might have went down. Oh, let's see here.
And
there he is. Looks like we lost you there.
Oh. Well, that. Oh. I was. Oh, it said. Oh, network error.
Yeah, because
well,
yeah, because your audio is starting to go bad, and then all of a sudden your screen just froze.
Oh, well, that sucks.
But now you're back online. I was about to message you, and then all of a sudden you came back.
Oh, okay. So what was the last thing you heard me say?
I have no idea.
Well, I guess let me just start from the beginning again, if I can remember. I mean, there's a reason why King Kong is one of the most popular screen icons of all time. And like you said, without Kong, there very likely is no Godzilla. I mean, Tomoyuki Tanaka and Toho were very much trying to make their own King Kong, so to speak. And you could even maybe dub Godzilla the King Kong of the East.
Yeah.
This character who started 90 years ago in a movie continues to thrive on. Granted, yes, some of that is through the result of reboots and remakes and all that too. That definitely does play a big part in keeping a character alive and well within the consciousness of contemporary audiences and all that. But yeah, I mean, this character is a very endearing character. I think part of it is not just because the movie itself was a major turning point in motion picture making, which that certainly is a part of it. Part of it, too, is entertainment value. The fact that this character lives on a very unique island where time has frozen over the last 66 million years. And as a result, you get that part of our brain that is very intrigued and entertained by all the weird creatures and fights that happen on that island. But not only that, I think to some degree, on a very deeper level, I'm going to wax philosophical here in that I think to some degree, we see a little bit of Kong in ourselves. The fact that obviously humans and primates are very, very closely related, and that to some degree we wish we were Kong on some level. Maybe we don't want to live on an island with a bunch of other things that want to kill us 24/7, but we sort of feel for Kong. We understand him, and I think again even more so in the Peter Jackson version than most of the other versions of Kong. And and this character very much is on a small level, a mirror of who we are as a species and as individuals. But at the same time, too, there is this level of sadness. I guess, too, on a deeper level, the King Kong story, especially if you're talking more about the 33 type, both the 33 and Peter Jackson type, and maybe even the 76 one, there is sort of this sad commentary on humanity itself, that humanity is so intrigued with money and greed that it's willing to exploit other living beings, including beings that are very closely related to man himself. And the result is always because of man's greed, hubris, tendency to be violent, and tendency to be afraid of what he does not understand. The result always ends up in death of the creature that is innocent. Kong is an innocent creature, in a lot of these films. He did not ask to be taken off his island, nor to be exploited in the fashion that he was in some of these films. And yet, sadly, because of, like I said, man's greed, hubris, afraid of not understanding anything beyond his own world, so to speak, and man's stupidity, let's just call it out, it's man's stupidity, they kill. And they kill him. And like I said, it's one of the very sad things that I get from Kong when you do the stereotypical Kong story, that you know he's going to end up dead. And that's why the Peter Jackson film, I think, illustrates what the 33 film was wanting to do, but just couldn't do, or maybe in a roundabout way didn't want to do either, perhaps. That's why I think Peter Jackson's Kong, for me, looms as, I'm just going to say the M word, masterpiece. I think Peter Jackson's Kong is not just the best Kong, I think it is one of the more fantastic films made of our lifetime. And sadly, it's a film that I don't think will ever get recognized as such, because first and foremost, it's a remake. Second of all, it would be what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It would be the 7th, if you include Son of Kong, the 7th Kong-related movie that was made at the time of its release. So it's not unique in that sense either. But like I said, it fleshes everything out better. And this character very much, in a way, is us. It is us should we not have civilization. That we are living beings. We want to live and live happily and peacefully, but you push the right buttons, we're going to go ape on you. And I think there's that. I think it's a multi-layer aspect as to why this character is so endearing and has lasted for so long. I mean, it's the same reason why comic book characters, many of them, are still popular decades later.
And then when it comes to the 33, 76, 86, as well as the 2005 films here, that there is also a recurring theme is that Kong always tends to end up being a tragic character, as well, with a lot of things just sort of happening to him in a way that he just does not deserve the type of things that are brought upon to him in that regard. Because, like, yeah, he just ends up being a tragic character in the end. But when it comes to, like, the MonsterVerse version, it sort of leans into that way, but more or less like an anti-hero or a hero in a way.
Yeah, I wouldn't say he's not really anti-hero in the MonsterVerse. I would say he comes off more hero. But I think with Kong too, I think I forgot it. That's not good. I think see if I can try to, like, bring it back to memory here. I think with Kong as well, motherfucker, I'm going to kick myself. It'll probably come to mind, like, as soon as we get off. I think too, there is this level of being an underdog as well, even though, as Carl Denham in both the 33 and 05 films said, he was a king of his world. While that's, I guess you could argue, is true, obviously, when he's moved to New York, it's this foreign place. He has no idea. And again, the 2005 film illustrates this so much better, in that when he escapes from the theater, you see him, like, you see this look of like astonishment on his face. Like, what is happening? People are crashing into him and he's backing off, and he's like, he's not violent initially. He's like, what the hell is going on here? What is this place? And it's only after like a number of cars smash into him, there's all this blaring noise and stuff from people screaming and cars and trains and all this other stuff. Yeah, that he eventually becomes agitated. But even then, he spends a lot of time running away. He's trying to probably think he can run back home, even though he has no clue as to where he is. And there's that underdog tale that maybe there's something deeper to be said there, where, yeah, in this world that you've lived in for who knows how long that Kong lived on Skull Island, that when you're thrown into a different environment, you're the alien, you're the underdog, because you don't understand this other world, this culture, and what these other beings are capable of doing when you're in their house. And I think, like I said, there's maybe something deeper to be said there that I can't maybe figure out at this point in time, that maybe with more time and thought, maybe I could figure something out, or maybe somebody's already written it down somewhere. I would like to know. Yeah. But I mean, there's just there's something there that's unique too about being out of your element, out of your own, really not of your own force, like, because he was dragged there. He didn't ask to be taken there. And
I think that's sort of what that tragic character element sort of comes into play, is that things are being brought onto him that he doesn't really deserve or just doesn't quite understand. That sort of thing kind of comes into play in that regard.
And King Kong, again, we're kind of referring more to the stereotypical 33 type of story. It's a love story on some level as well. And again, I know I keep bashing it, but again, I still think the Peter Jackson movie does it better. I think you see it more in the Jackson film, this love story. And there's something to be said about that too. There's this love tale, almost even a love triangle, even, you could argue, because Jack Driscoll is involved. Hey, Tomoyuki Tanaka and the guys at Gojira stole that from this movie. But not Peter Jackson's version. But but I think maybe there's something to be said about that too. It's this love story. And for me personally, and I think about it more over the last 10 years, because Jason and I grew up with a cat that we were best buds with and we really loved. And I see it more now than I did back then in 2005, where I look at a little bit of that love that Anne has with Kong, like I said earlier, as love between a person and a beloved pet. And I think that's part of the reason, too, for me, when I view that part of the movie from maybe the middle part and especially towards the end, as being very depressing, because it's like, this individual you love so much. I mean, my cat thankfully didn't get killed, but he died living a long life. But you lose that individual you love so much, and it's heartbreaking to see them die. And I think for me, as I watch that Peter Jackson movie, I see a little bit of that playing out as well. And that's also a little bit of the reason why I find it maybe a little more tragic than I did even in 2005, even though I remember sitting in that theater crying a little bit quietly when I saw that in the theater. But and I remember my heart pounding when we were getting towards that Empire State Building thing and the planes are coming in, and then James Newton Howard's music swells with the drums like because he's going to die. You just know. And you don't want to be sad, but very likely you will, because Jackson is showing this is a more sophisticated representation of Kong. And so getting back to the whole pet thing, I think it's been a little bit harder for me to view that ending more, because it's like that connection you have with a pet, and it fucking sucks.
Yeah. But yeah, Kong, he's got quite the legacy, you know. Hard to believe it's 90 years. Just, I think with many more years, probably going to see more Kong movies being made. I don't know if they might have something planned for the 100th anniversary when that comes 10 years from now. Hard to believe. But yeah, at least right now they're going to have, you know, both Kong and Godzilla back in a sequel next year. Kind of like to see how that's going to play out. But if they're going to have another villain come into play like they did with Mechagodzilla here. So we'll just have to find out in about a year from this coming Wednesday when that movie comes out.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, and I said it many times in the lead up to Godzilla vs. Kong, I'm definitely going for Godzilla. I don't know. I just love Godzilla more. I can't explain it, but I do love Kong. I mean, I'm wearing a Kong shirt. I even have shirts similar to what Jason's got. I've got a couple other Kong shirts up in my closet here. And so I love Kong. King Kong is definitely still a very special character to me. I mean, as long as I can, I will go continue to see the movies and support this character and all that. And so, yeah.
Same here.
So with all that being said, here in a couple weeks on March 25th, we will be doing, once again, a commentary on Son of Kong. That'll be a short movie. I think the movie's like 75 minutes or something like that.
69 minutes. I knew it.
It's pretty short, and yeah, it'll be an interesting watch. So join us for that in a couple Saturdays.
And just to touch upon it for the last time here before we sign off, if you're watching us for the first time, or if you've been watching us from time to time, if you see a subscribe button down below the video wherever you're watching us, make sure to hit that, and also smash the like button as well. And you can also find us everywhere, right at our Linktree page / Daikaiju Network. You can find us on the following video platforms. Obviously, YouTube. We're also on Twitch, Rumble, Facebook Live, as well as Odyssey. And we're also on audio platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, as well as TuneIn. And you can find both versions of our audio or video episodes at our own website at daikaijunetwork.com.
And with that, thank you so much for listening or watching us, and we will be back in a couple weeks with a commentary on Son of Kong.
All right. See you guys next time.